From time to time, we've received comments or requests in the comments section, how do you mix skin tones? Well, I've kind of not answered that before because there's so many videos on YouTube about how to mix skin tones. And this one came in, same request, and I decided, okay, it's time to show folks how to mix skin tones. So, let's mix some tones. One thing that makes skin tone mixing difficult is that variations of the colors that we find in skin tones are unlimited. I have just a few examples here. Not only the tones of our skin, each one of us really has our unique tone of skin, no matter what race we are. But not only do you have that to consider, you have to consider the variations we find in all these tones according to what kind of light the person is in, or according to not only that, but within the light that a person is in, what's happening to the colors, the actual color mixtures in light and in shadow. We can see right here, for example, there's some really strong light and really strong shadow. Then we see here hardly any shadow at all. And you don't see here, this is a lower lit photograph, and you see just a little bit of just subtle variations there. So how do we approach that when you have everything from a skin color like this compared to a skin color like this compared to a skin color, and you just go on and on? Well, you don't have to have formulas for every single race or every single circumstance. There's a way you can figure this out for yourself. And you know, I always like to show you that. How do you figure it out for yourself? One way to figure it is, first of all, learn how to observe what you're looking at. If you're just calling it skin tone, you're not going to be able to see it. You're not going to be able to see the color of it. But a really good little method, this is a little technical thing you can do here, just to take a regular 3x5 card like this and punch a couple of holes in it with a big hole puncher, or cut them out, doesn't matter, and use it for an isolator. Now let's go to this photo where we have the top of the baby's head is in somewhat in shadow. You can see the shadow right here because of the way the light source is behind the baby and to the side right there. Can you see the strongest light right here? And so that throws then the frontal part of the baby's face, a lot of that in shadow, or in some kind of shadow, a shallow shadow, but shadow nevertheless. And because the light is lower down, the upper part of the forehead of the baby's face is more in shadow. A little bit of light reflecting right here. So how do you see that? One way you can see it is to simply isolate it. And you can put an isolator or use a hole like that as an isolator. And so what do you look at when you isolate? Well, one thing you notice is value. Where does what you're looking at fall on the value scale? You can see this is white. The card itself is white. That would, on my value scale, that is number 1. On the reverse value scale, it's number 10. So the main thing is to be able to call it what it is. It's not the darkest dark. It's not the lightest light, but it is in a middle value range. Now we can compare that section and just move this up. Look at that. In one section, or on one face, we have that variation in value and that variation in color. See, if we compare this one in value to the card, it's much lighter. So you see how you have at least this much value difference between what we're seeing here and what we're seeing here. And then another place is right here where the light is shining most directly on the child's face. It's almost white. And then you see on the opposite side, on the forehead, you compare and see how dark that is. Find the value first, because then that tells you what range you need to be looking at. Now, when you find the value, where do you go from there? I'm just going to leave that card right there and show you where you can go. Didn't mean that literally. Refer back to the color wheel. Now, I have I've designed this color wheel. Let me leave this up here for a moment, just to explain what I've done here. I've designed this color wheel to show two things. To show the hue as we see it normally arranged around a color wheel, but also to show what happens to each of these hues when a bit of its complement at the same value is added into it. And that we call then reduced saturation. Now that's a good thing to know, because if you recognize how saturated a color is or how desaturated it is, then you can get closer to knowing what to do for skin tones, because I can't think of any situation where the tone of any human being's skin is fully saturated. And if there is any part, it could be red lipstick. That's not a part of the person. That's something that's put on the person. So, and if you were doing a clown's face, of course, I'm talking about regular human skin. So what are we looking for here? Now let me explain this to you. You can go to the website, first of all, DianneMize.com, click on free stuff in the menu, and you'll be taken to lots of things, a lot of aids there that we have free for you. And this is one of them. It's called an intensity, a 6-degree intensity wheel. We use the word intensity and the word chroma, both to refer to the saturation of hue. And I mean by saturation is simply what degree the hue is 100% of that pure, or to what degree it has its complement in it. And the more complement in proportion any hue has in it, the more neutral it gets. And then that's what we find right over in the, more or less on this side of the color wheel. We see here tones that we might refer to as skin tones. So your first clue there is to look for desaturated or mixed towards desaturated hues. I'm going to do just a little bit of that for you in just a moment, but I wanted to show you how to do that first, how to get that to work for you. Now, if we go here, I have this one cut so that I've got slots between each of these sections, and makes us see this more easily. If we're looking for the hue, this is a hue first, a value and a hue, and we already talked about value. If we go to that first, then you can see here, I'll pull that down just a little bit, like that. You can see here that this is very close to where we are right here. If we identify this hue, we would identify it as orange. Yellow, yellow, orange, orange, red, orange, red. So we could identify the hue as orange. It is a very low saturated hue of orange. Now let's see if we can mix that. Just that one color, and then we'll look at this. We'll mix it. We'll do the value as we're mixing. Okay. But to mix my orange, I have here cadmium red light and cadmium yellow deep. Two colors I'm going to make an orange with. Now this is highly saturated. There is a shortcut to this. I'll show you that in just a moment. But I just want to show you how that works, first of all. So we need that add an orange. That's still more like a red orange. So I'll put more of this in it, and we'll get that registering in the orange range. Now the next thing, once we have that registering in the orange range, the next thing we can see here, very saturated. The next thing is be sure that it's in the same value. That's what we're looking at right here. And it's difficult to tell with these highly saturated colors, but that looks in the vicinity to me of the same value. Okay, the next step to that, we found the value, we found the hue. Now we need to find the saturation in order to find this color that we're looking at. So again, we go back to the color wheel, and we see on the color wheel that the complement of orange directly across from it is blue. Now that's a blue that doesn't lean towards violet, it doesn't lean towards green. It's simply blue. Cobalt blue is a good one for that. I'm going to take ultramarine blue here, I'm going to go right over here, and the first thing I notice is that ultramarine blue is very dark, very much darker than this. So the first thing I need to do to get that ultramarine blue so that it's going to desaturate it but keep it in this value I need here is to value correct the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to value correct it now. So I'll just value correct the blue by adding white to it, and that's still a little bit darker, so let's just add a little bit more white to it. And you might say, well, that's a lot of trouble, Gotcha. Why can't it just come straight from a tube? You can, almost, but you also have to remember that as the light changes over a human face, so is the color and the value going to change. So you really have more control over getting the vibrancy of the colors you see in the skin tone if you begin with the saturated colors, but you don't have to begin with saturated colors. So just hang on, I'm going to show you just a moment, a slight shortcut to that. Alright, so that is a little bit lighter, just a little bit lighter, and that, I'm looking at my palette here is a value of 5, middle value palette, and when I squint, this blue is falling pretty close to this. Now, first of all, I'll start by pulling just a little bit of this saturated orange over here, and now I'm going to pull ultramarine blue beside it, and now I'm going to begin to desaturate. Now, what I pay attention to when I desaturate is the degree to which it gets desaturated, because if I pull too much blue into it, I'm going to over neutralize it. That's the same thing as desaturating. If I don't put enough ultramarine blue into it, I'm going to under neutralize. So in order to get the color I'm looking at right here, I've got to have the correct proportions, but there might need to be one other correction to be made. So that's what I want you to pay attention to now. To be able to really read that, I cut these little test strips. I've talked about them in other quick tips. 3x5 cards, really cheap at dollar store, and I just cut those to use as test strips. And so what I'll do is to pull a little bit of this on the edge of a test strip of what I've got there, and I'll compare it. Now see, I'm almost there. It seems to be a little dark, and it seems like I might have over neutralized just a little bit. So now, when I say to myself it seems to be a little dark, I go back into the white and lighten it. Now if I had not value corrected this, it would have been way too dark. So then I'll lighten, and then I'll check it to see does that give me then the tone I need, or is it still too neutralized. So I'll put that on the tip, and you can carry yourself. Yeah, that's close, but you see I took it just a little bit too neutral. So I'll go back and add more of the saturated color to it, and when I do that, I may darken it a little bit as well. But let's test it. Let's find out. So these kinds of exercises are exercises that you can take yourself through step by step by step. I mean, figure things out before you start working. That's just a good way to go about it. And you see I'm very, very close there. That might need to be just a little bit pinker. In other words, it might need to be, maybe I need to have just a little bit more of the red in there. I might have gotten it a little too orange, but you could use cadmium orange rather than a mixture such as I did here, and maybe get something a little closer to it. And maybe just because I'm a smarty pants and I want to test that theory, I might add just a touch of the cadmium red light back into it and see. But once again, this will show you how to control the hues that or the colors that you're mixing. And let's see, that is, well, that's pretty close. Maybe this one's just as close. Now, I promised you I would show you a way that you can shortcut that. We do have desaturated colors that come out of the tube. Burnt sienna is one of those that is, as it comes out of the tube, desaturated. Rembrandt's transparent oxide red is another one. They're very close in hue. And so what you can do, let's go to the Rembrandt transparent oxide red. And you see, when I bring that down, it's very, very dark. So I see already, I really can't tell what hue I have or to the degree of saturation because of its darkness. So the first thing I'll do then is do a value or aim for the value I'm getting right there. And as I said, this is a shortcut, but I want to show you how we get there. So, and pull that value, and you can see how close this is to what I just mixed there already. And let's get that in the same value range. Here we go right here. And then let's take a test strip. Let's get that just a tiny bit darker. Now let's take a test strip and let's put it on the test strip. Always on the edge there so we can make an accurate comparison. Alright, now, okay, it needs to be a little bit darker. I think I perceive something else there that I wonder if you perceive too, and that is, although it needs to be a little darker, it's telling me something about the hue. Now, let me tell you what it's telling me about the hue. Okay, let's get this on here a little bit darker and get that closer to that value. Okay, that's very close to the value. It's telling me something about the hue. I'm seeing it when I do that. I'm seeing that hue going a little bit more towards almost violet. So I can do two things. I could reach for a violet, which is red violet, which is, on my palette, is quinacridone violet. Or I could reach for alizarin crimson. And let's just try a little experiment here with both of these colors. This is showing you, reading the value, reading the saturation, reading the hue. And in learning to read that hue and watch how that hue varies within value and saturation ranges will enable you to get any skin tone you're looking for. So I'm going to value correct, always value correct before mixing two colors. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to take just that ultramarine, not ultramarine, I'm going to take just that alizarin crimson in that mixture and hold it to my little test strip there. Alizarin crimson is already somewhat desaturated. Alright, so you see there is some of that red in there. In fact, that may be another way to go around it. So suppose I take some of this desaturated color out of the tube and mix it with this and see what that gives us. So you can see here how if you depend upon formulas, okay, if someone tells you, okay, to mix a skin tone, this is what you do. You mix so much of this color, so much of this color, etc., etc. Oh yeah, that'll give you one skin tone, but it won't give you the skin tone you're looking at necessarily. So you see, I'm in the range there, in close range, it's just not quite dark enough. So we'll get that just a little bit darker. And I think this add just a little bit of that blue in there to help maybe reduce it just a little bit more. And I think we might be surprised how close that will get us. You see how very close we are right there. So that is one way to figure it out. Now, of course, in the tones we're seeing right here, you see it, that's almost white. But then, so we could go up into the white, and we say that's almost white, but it's also, it feels very pink. That's a word that people use to mean red. If we go back into this color, which is the alizarin crimson, and we just pick up some of the value corrected alizarin crimson, and all we need is to tint it maybe just a little bit and begin comparing there. And let's put a little bit of that on the test strip. And what do we have? Almost on the money right there. So now take this away and look at all the other tones that we see there. And one way we can actually make ourselves aware of those other tones that we see there is just to take one of the test strips and move it around And what we do see when we look at this whole thing, I was on this area here where more light was hitting, we do see it going more towards violet. So you see, when you learn to use tools such as the color wheel, and I think my tool is a wonderful one for you, and it's free. So you can go to the website and get that free. And even if you've got a good printer, print it in a good quality paper, either a presentation paper or a non-gloss or matte surface photographic paper. Or it would be worth it, if you don't have a printer, to take it to a professional and let them print it for you. And then if you cut out just with an X-Acto knife or some kind of blade, if you cut these slots out here so that you can actually use this to compare or to read where you're going to begin to identify the skin tones, then you should be able to mix any tone you need. Don't assume that any tone is at any hue, any color. Because we could see, for example, you can see right here how this tone ends up being in the low saturated blue and blue violet range. And then we've already gone through what we saw there. But if we go to a tone like this up here, then that it gets more towards right in here between the red violet, almost in that red violet range, a little bit leaning just a little bit towards that red range. So learn to read the hue. First learn to read the value, isolate what you're seeing, read the value, read the hue. Now I have a recommendation. Anybody, any of you who might be watching this and you really are interested in portrait painting, one of the best books on portrait paint, on the colors to use in portrait painting of different kinds of skin tones, is this Portrait from Life by John Howard Sandon. It may be out of print. You can go to his website and see if it's still in print, or you can go to Amazon and try it. But if you really want to get deep in, he has his own mixtures that are for sale, but he also names colors that would go into mixtures. He does give you formulas there, which you don't really need. If you can figure out what colors you need to mix to get the tones just by going through these exercises that I've taken you through here. So give that a try and enjoy mixing skin tones. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.